The quantum entanglement communication array hummed with a subtle vibration that only Elena Rodriguez could sense. 27 years of deep space command had given her an intuition that transcended standard sensor readings. Her eyes, augmented with neural-linked retinal displays, flickered with a constellation of data points that told a story far more complex than the seemingly calm bridge of the U.S. Chimera. "Incoming transmission protocol Omega-7, murmured Lieutenant Kai Chen from the communication station. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces, each movement precise, each gesture hiding layers of complexity. The Vexneri believed they were initiating first contact. In reality, they were walking into a carefully constructed scenario that had been decades in the making. The bridge crew was a study in controlled tension. No unnecessary movements, no visible stress. Just a machine-like precision that belied the incredible complexity of their preparation. Rodriguez knew every member of her team had been selected not just for their technical expertise, but for their ability to remain absolutely calm under the most extreme psychological pressure. On the main view screen, the Vexneri diplomatic vessel approached. Its design was typical of their species, a massive crystalline structure that looked more like a mathematical equation made physical than a spacecraft. Sweeping geometric patterns suggested advanced technology, but to the human eyes watching, it was just another puzzle waiting to be decoded. "Analyzing transmission signature," Chen reported, his voice neutral. A series of holographic windows burst into existence around him, each representing a different layer of communication analysis. What the Vexneri didn't realize was that this single transmission was being processed through quantum algorithms that could extract more information from background radiation than most species could from direct communication. Commander Sarah Reyes, the ship's xenolinguistic specialist, leaned forward slightly. Her augmented brain was already running parallel processing algorithms, breaking down the alien communication into its most fundamental components. Years of study had taught humanity that language was more than words. It was a complex interplay of cultural context, psychological positioning, and hidden information layers. The initial Vexneri transmission was exactly what their historical records suggested, a combination of bureaucratic formality and subtle psychological manipulation. They were testing humanity's response, probing for weakness, preparing to categorize humans into their vast galactic hierarchical system. Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest hint of a smile. "Prepare response package Alpha," she commanded. To an outside observer, it would seem like a standard diplomatic acknowledgement, but the data packet was anything but standard. Embedded within the seemingly innocuous transmission was a meticulously crafted information construct. It wasn't just a message, it was a psychological profile generator, a piece of adaptive intelligence that would begin to map the Vexneri communication systems, their cultural assumptions, and their deepest psychological vulnerabilities. "Transmission sent," Chen confirmed. "Quantum entanglement markers are stable. No detectable trace beyond standard communication protocols." The bridge remained silent, each crew member monitoring multiple layers of information. They weren't just preparing for first contact, they were conducting the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation in human history. What the Vexneri didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations. Every deep space mission, every xenological study, every seemingly random exploration had been part of a larger strategy. Humanity wasn't just reaching out to the stars. They were learning how to hunt on a cosmic scale. Rodriguez's neural implants gave her a momentary flash of the mission's deeper context. Generations of researchers, diplomatic strategists, and explorers had contributed to this moment. It wasn't about military conquest or territorial expansion. It was about understanding, about positioning humanity as more than just another species in the galactic ecosystem. The Vexneri would soon learn that humans were something entirely different, not conquerors, not explorers, hunters. And the hunt was just beginning. Dr. Aria Nakamura's laboratory was a controlled chaos of light and shadow, quantum imaging equipment casting ethereal blue-green glows across pristine surfaces. The genetic sample from the Vexneri research team sat suspended in a quantum-stabilized containment field, a tiny droplet of alien biological material that represented the most significant xenobiological discovery in human history. Thax, the lead Vexneri researcher, watched through a specialized viewing portal, mandibles clicking with a rhythm that betrayed growing frustration. 3 standard galactic cycles of research, and the human genetic sample continued to defy every known principle of biological science. Impossible, Thax muttered, the translation matrix rendering the alien language with clinical precision. Adaptive response exceeds all known genetic modification parameters. Nakamura didn't respond immediately. Her augmented eyes, a delicate mesh of biological and quantum optical sensors, tracked microscopic changes in the genetic structure with inhuman precision. Where the Vexneri saw a static biological sample, she observed a living, breathing system of incredible complexity. Quantum genetic resonance at 0.003 variance, she murmured to her assistant, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez. Observe the cellular membrane's adaptive response. On the holographic display, the genetic sample began to shift. Not in the crude, predictable manner of standard cellular adaptation, but with a fluidity that suggested something closer to intelligence than mere biological programming. The cell membrane rippled, reconfigured, responded to environmental stimuli in milliseconds, changes that would take the Vexneri centuries of careful genetic engineering. Thax's scientific curiosity was rapidly transforming into something closer to terror. Your species does not understand genetic modification, the alien researcher stated, a note of desperation creeping into its voice. This is not adaptation. This is evolution. Nakamura completed the thought, her voice calm. Real-time, adaptive evolution. The human laboratory was a marvel of controlled environment and technological sophistication. Quantum containment fields, adaptive sensor arrays, and computational systems that could process genetic information at speeds that would overwhelm most alien scientific installations. But what made it truly remarkable was the team. Researchers who saw genetics not as a mechanical process, but as a living, dynamic system. Dr. Rodriguez manipulated a series of quantum interfaces, introducing subtle environmental stressors to the genetic sample. Each stimulus was a carefully crafted test, designed to provoke a response that would reveal the deeper mechanisms of human genetic potential. The results were extraordinary. The genetic sample didn't just adapt. It anticipated. Cellular structures reconfigured themselves milliseconds before the actual environmental change, suggesting a level of predictive capability that defied traditional understanding of biological systems. Thax's research team had spent generations perfecting genetic modification techniques. Entire civilizations within the Vexneri collective would dedicate centuries to modifying a single genetic line, carefully controlling every possible variable. Humans seemed to do this in real time, with a fluidity that suggested the genetic code was less a blueprint and more of a living, thinking system. The quantum entanglement within the cellular matrix, Nakamura explained, more to herself than to her colleagues, suggests a level of information processing that goes beyond traditional genetic understanding. Each cell is not just responding, it's learning. Marcus Rodriguez brought up a comparative analysis. Side by side, the human genetic sample and standard Vexneri genetic modification techniques looked like a living organism next to a crude mechanical model. Thax was breaking. The alien researcher's entire understanding of biological science was crumbling. Centuries of scientific certainty were being dismantled by a single genetic sample, by a species they had initially dismissed as primitive. How? Thax finally asked, a note of genuine scientific desperation in the translated voice. How is this possible? Nakamura smiled. It was not a warm smile, but the expression of a predator who has just identified something fascinating. We don't modify genetics, she said quietly. We hunt biological possibilities. The genetic sample continued to dance its impossible dance of adaptation, a living testament to humanity's true nature. Not conquerors, not engineers, hunters of the most fundamental kind. The diplomatic chamber was a masterpiece of calculated neutrality. Soft lighting adjusted in real time to subconscious stress responses, surfaces designed to create imperceptible psychological comfort. Dr. Marcus Chen sat at the center of this carefully constructed environment, looking deceptively calm. Across from him, the Vexenary psychological warfare team assembled, 3 beings selected from generations of diplomatic manipulation. Zurin, the lead operator, had broken the psychological defenses of 17 different space-faring civilizations. Their reputation was legendary, their techniques considered unbreakable. They didn't realize they were already losing. The initial communication protocol began. Zurin deployed what they considered their most sophisticated opening gambit, a multilayered linguistic construct designed to create subtle cognitive dissonance. The words were chosen with mathematical precision, each syllable calibrated to trigger specific neurological stress responses. Chen's neural implants processed the communication on multiple levels simultaneously. Where Zurin saw a carefully constructed psychological weapon, Chen saw a map, a detailed blueprint of the Vexenary's own psychological vulnerabilities. "Interesting approach," Chen said, his voice neutral. A single phrase that contained layers of meaning invisible to the alien team. Zurin's secondary communication tendrils, biological appendages that typically read micro-expressions and emotional states, found nothing. Dr. Chen was a blank slate, a psychological mirror that reflected nothing while absorbing everything. What the Vexenary didn't understand was that humanity had been studying psychological warfare for centuries, not as a weapon of conquest, but as a fundamental form of communication. Every diplomatic encounter, every cross-cultural interaction, every moment of human conflict had been a laboratory for understanding the deepest mechanisms of psychological interaction. Chen's team had spent months preparing for this encounter, not by developing counter techniques, but by creating a comprehensive understanding of the Vexenary psychological infrastructure. Their preparation wasn't defensive, it was predatory. Zurin deployed their second-tier technique, a cascade of linguistic patterns designed to create subtle emotional destabilization. To the Vexenary, it was a weapon that had subjugated entire civilizations, words that would typically create cascading psychological collapse. Chen smiled, not with his face, but with the subtle quantum entanglement of his neural response. Each of Zurin's psychological probes was now becoming a two-way information channel. What they intended as a weapon was being transformed into a detailed map of Vexenary psychological architecture. Every attempt to manipulate was simultaneously revealing the deepest structures of alien thought. "You're quite skilled," Chen said, a statement that contained multiple layers of meaning. To the translation matrix, it was a simple compliment. To the quantum linguistic processors running in the background, it was a precise deconstruction of the Vexenary's entire communicative approach. Zurin's team began to realize something was wrong. Their techniques, perfected over millennia, were not just being resisted. They were being studied, analyzed, and transformed. The diplomatic chamber itself was a subtle weapon. Every surface, every light adjustment, every acoustic modification was collecting data. The humans weren't just defending against psychological warfare. They were turning the entire encounter into a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation. Chen's neural implants were processing information at speeds that would overwhelm most computational systems. Each linguistic exchange was being broken down, analyzed, and reconstructed in real time. What the Vexenary saw as a diplomatic encounter, humans saw as a complex informational ecosystem. "Perhaps we could discuss your communication strategies," Chen suggested, a simple invitation that contained within it a complete deconstruction of the Vexenary psychological manipulation techniques. Zurin's team was breaking. Their most sophisticated psychological weapons were being transformed, turned back upon themselves. They were no longer the hunters. They had become the studied, the analyzed, the prey. Humanity wasn't resisting psychological warfare. They were redefining it entirely. The hunt was linguistic. The terrain was consciousness itself, and humans were the apex predators of communication. The Orion cluster hung like a jeweled tapestry against the infinite black, a region of space that had witnessed countless stellar conflicts. The Vexenary battle fleet arrived with the confidence of a species that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia. Their formation was mathematically perfect, a three-dimensional combat matrix that had broken the will of 17 spacefaring civilizations. They didn't see the U.S. Chimera. Captain Alina Rodriguez sat in the command chair, her neural interface humming with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. Around her, the bridge crew moved with a synchronicity that defied traditional military training. They weren't just a team. They were a singular adaptive organism. Incoming Vexenary combat formation, Lieutenant Kai Chen reported. His voice was calm, almost clinical. Standard engagement pattern, Omega 9. Predictive analysis shows 97.3% probability of total system dominance based on their historical combat records. A ghost of a smile crossed Rodriguez's lips. Probability meant nothing to hunters. The Vexenary fleet approached with calculated precision. Massive crystalline warships that could shatter planetary defenses, their weapon systems a complex dance of quantum-disruptive weaponry. Each ship was a mathematical weapon, each movement a calculated strike designed to overwhelm and destroy. Hunting protocols engage, Rodriguez commanded. The U.S. Chimera seemed to shimmer, not a physical transformation, but a fundamental reconfiguration of its entire operational matrix. Where moments before it had been a standard exploration vessel, it now became something entirely different. The first wave of Vexenary quantum disruptors fired. Weapon signatures that had atomized entire civilizations, that could reduce matter to its constituent quantum components. They passed through the space where the Chimera should have been. Rodriguez's crew didn't dodge. They predicted. Quantum navigation at 0.02 variance, Chen reported. Each word was a precision instrument. The ship wasn't moving to avoid damage. It was existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously, rendering traditional weapon targeting impossible. The Vexenary fleet's initial assault was a mathematical symphony of destruction. But mathematics requires predictability, and humans had long since learned to hunt beyond mathematical certainty. The Chimera's response was not a counterattack. It was a complete deconstruction of the Vexenary combat paradigm. Adaptive nanosystems began to interface with the alien fleet's communication networks, not through force, but through a kind of technological empathy that the Vexenary couldn't comprehend. Each quantum pulse was simultaneously a weapon, a communication channel, and a method of intelligence gathering. Weapon systems are adaptive cognitive matrices, Rodriguez explained, though no one on the bridge needed the explanation. We're not fighting. We're learning. The battle became something beyond traditional warfare. The Chimera didn't seek to destroy the Vexenary fleet. It sought to understand it completely, to map its entire operational structure in real time. Vexenary ships began to experience systemic failures, not from direct attacks, but from their own systems being slowly, methodically comprehended and neutralized. It was less a battle and more a form of technological dissection. Communication networks compromised in 37% of enemy vessels, Chen reported. His voice carried no excitement, no triumph, just pure clinical observation. The hunting protocols were about more than victory. They were about understanding. Each moment of the encounter was a data point, each quantum interaction a method of learning. Rodriguez watched the Vexenary fleet, once considered invincible, slowly becoming a map of technological potential. They weren't an enemy to be destroyed. They were a complex system to be understood. Tactical assessment complete, she said quietly. The Orion cluster would remember this moment, not as a battle, but as the moment humanity revealed itself not as conquerors, not as defenders, but as hunters of the most sophisticated kind. The containment laboratory gleamed with an almost living intensity. Dr. Yuki Okamoto moved with a predatory grace that belied her scientific background. her augmented eyes scanning the Vexneri technological sample with an intensity that made the alien research team increasingly uncomfortable. They had been granted limited access, or so they believed. In reality, they were the ones being studied. The technological artifact sat suspended in a quantum adaptive containment field, a piece of Vexneri engineering that represented centuries of their most advanced research. To the alien observers, it was a pinnacle of technological achievement. To Dr. Okamoto, it was an ecosystem waiting to be understood. Quantum resonance at 0.74 variance, she murmured, more to herself than to the increasingly agitated Vexneri researchers. Each movement of her hands across the holographic interfaces was a carefully choreographed dance of investigation. Lead researcher Vinak watched with growing unease. Humans had been granted what was supposed to be a cursory examination of Vexneri technological principles. What was happening was something entirely different. The containment field wasn't just containing the technological sample, it was communicating with it. Quantum entanglement sensors began to map the internal structure of the Vexneri artifact with a precision that defied their understanding of information transfer. Where their technology saw boundaries, human systems saw interconnected possibilities. Adaptive matrix response is nonlinear, Okamoto explained to her assistant, Dr. Rafael Martinez. Her voice carried a note of scientific excitement that was carefully controlled. The technological substrate isn't just a system. It's a living information ecosystem. The Vexneri technological principles were based on rigid, hierarchical information structures. Centuries of technological development had created systems of incredible complexity, but ultimately finite predictability. Human technology operated on fundamentally different principles. Each probe, each quantum-level interaction, was simultaneously an investigation and a method of communication. The human systems didn't just analyze the Vexneri technology. They engaged with it as a living system. Vinak's translation matrix picked up Okamoto's next statement with growing horror. "We're not reverse engineering," she said quietly. "We're having a conversation." The technological sample began to change, not through external manipulation, but through a form of quantum-level dialogue that the Vexneri researchers couldn't comprehend. Their most advanced piece of technology was being understood at a level that went beyond traditional scientific investigation. Adaptive nanosystems within the human research environment began to map the technological artifact's internal structure. But it wasn't a mechanical process. Each interaction was a form of learning, of mutual adaptation. "Structural integrity analysis complete," Martins reported. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part was how the technology worked. The Vexneri saw their technological achievements as fixed systems of incredible complexity. Humans saw them as living, breathing information ecosystems that could be understood, communicated with, transformed. Vinak's scientific worldview was crumbling. The human research team wasn't just studying their technology. They were hunting its fundamental principles, understanding it at a level that went beyond physical investigation. "Quantum communication protocols are showing unexpected resonance," Okamoto noted. Each word was a precision instrument. The technological sample was no longer just an object of study. It was becoming a participant in its own investigation. The Vexneri research team realized, with growing terror, that they weren't observing a scientific investigation. They were witnessing a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. Humans weren't just technological engineers. They were technological hunters. And the entire universe was their hunting ground. The Cultural Observation Chamber was nothing like a traditional diplomatic space. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of human potential, a space that defied every conventional understanding of social structure and organizational dynamics. Diplomat Aisha Rahman stood at the center, not as a leader, but as a node in a complex human network. The Vexneri delegation watched through specialized observation systems, trying to comprehend what they were seeing. What looked like chaos was actually the most sophisticated social operating system in the known galaxy. Teams formed, dissolved, and reformed with liquid precision. Each human participant moved between roles with a fluidity that defied traditional hierarchical understanding. A researcher became a strategist became a communication specialist became a problem solver, all within moments, all with perfect synchronization. Crex, the lead vexnary cultural analyst, found their understanding of social systems collapsing. "Observe," Raman said, her voice carrying a note of something between invitation and challenge. "This is how we solve complex problems." The demonstration began with a seemingly impossible task, a multidimensional challenge that would typically require years of specialized preparation in vexnary society was about to be addressed in real time. The human team didn't assign roles. They didn't create a rigid structure. Instead, they became a living, breathing adaptive system. Neural interfaces hummed with quantum-level communication, not through technology, but through a form of collective intelligence that went beyond traditional communication. Each team member became simultaneously a specialist and a generalist, their cognitive boundaries fluid and dynamic. Crex watched in growing horror and fascination. A problem emerged, complex, multi-layered, requiring simultaneous expertise in quantum physics, cultural anthropology, strategic planning, and technological innovation. In a vexnary system, this would require a hierarchical committee spanning multiple generations. The human team solved it in 17 minutes, not through a single brilliant individual, not through a rigid organizational structure, but through a form of collective intelligence that transformed the very concept of problem solving. "We don't have roles," Raman explained. "We have potentials." Each team member moved through cognitive spaces with a fluidity that suggested something more than traditional learning. They weren't just adapting. They were evolving in real time, their collective intelligence becoming a living, breathing entity. The vexnary cultural model was based on rigid specialization. Individuals were defined by their specific function, their social value determined by their narrow expertise. Humans operated on a fundamentally different principle. Potential was their currency. Adaptation was their language. Crex's translation matrix struggled to capture the nuance of what was happening. This wasn't a team. This wasn't an organization. This was a living, breathing cognitive ecosystem. The technological challenge emerged. Simultaneously, a cultural complexity presented itself. A strategic problem intertwined with a philosophical question. In any other civilization, these would require separate committees, years of deliberation. The human team transformed the entire scenario into a single, fluid response. "We hunt solutions," Raman said quietly. The statement was both a description and a challenge. The observation chamber became a hunting ground, not of physical predation, but of intellectual possibility. Each moment was a dance of collective intelligence, each interaction a method of solving problems that didn't even exist yet. Crex realized something fundamental. Humans weren't just a species. They were a complex, adaptive intelligence that viewed the entire universe as a problem to be understood, a challenge to be met. Their social system wasn't a structure. It was a living organism. Their culture wasn't a fixed point. It was a method of continuous evolution. They weren't just participants in the cosmic ecosystem. They were its most sophisticated hunters. The diplomatic chamber was a quantum adaptive space that existed simultaneously as multiple potential environments. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at its center, not as a traditional negotiator, but as a living manifestation of humanity's cosmic potential. The vexnary Grand Diplomatic Consortium assembled across from her, 12 of the most sophisticated political minds in the known galaxy. They had come to offer humanity a position in the galactic hierarchy. What they didn't realize was that they were about to have their entire understanding of political interaction dismantled. "We are prepared to offer humanity a provisional status," began Archon Delegate Zurin, their voice a carefully modulated instrument of political manipulation. Tier 3 collaborative membership within the Galactic Confederation. Rodriguez didn't respond immediately. Her neural interfaces were processing multiple layers of communication simultaneously: linguistic, quantum informational, cultural, and strategic. What the Vexneri saw as a diplomatic offer, she saw as a complex ecosystem of potential interactions. The diplomatic chamber itself was alive with possibility. Quantum adaptive surfaces shifted imperceptibly, creating an environment that was simultaneously neutral and subtly responsive to the most minute psychological variations. "Interesting proposal," Rodriguez said finally. The words were a precision instrument, each syllable carrying layers of meaning that would take the Vexneri decades to fully unpack. What followed was not a traditional negotiation. It was a comprehensive deconstruction of galactic political paradigms. Rodriguez's proposal was not a counteroffer. It was a complete reimagining of interstellar cooperation. She didn't argue for humanity's position. She demonstrated a fundamental approach to collective existence that made the current galactic political structure look like a primitive artifact. The document she presented was simultaneously a diplomatic treaty, a philosophical manifesto, and a technological blueprint. It didn't seek to place humanity within the existing system. It proposed an entirely new framework of interaction. Quantum informational interfaces began to map the proposal's potential implications. Where the Vexneri saw boundaries, humans saw interconnected possibilities. Each clause was a living system, each paragraph a potential evolutionary path for galactic civilization. Archean delegate Zarin's sophisticated translation matrices began to break down. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a fundamental challenge to their entire understanding of political interaction. "You misunderstand," Rodriguez said quietly. "We're not asking to join your system. We're offering a new way of existing." The proposal touched on everything: resource allocation, technological exchange, cultural interaction. But it wasn't a set of rules. It was a dynamic, adaptive framework that could evolve in real time. Quantum-level analysis revealed something terrifying to the Vexneri delegation. This wasn't just a diplomatic document. It was a living system of potential interactions. The humans weren't seeking a place in the galactic hierarchy. They were proposing a complete transformation of what hierarchy could mean. "Our civilization is not a fixed point," Rodriguez explained. "It's a method of continuous adaptation." Each member of the human delegation moved with a fluidity that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. They weren't representatives. They were living nodes of a complex, adaptive intelligence. The Vexneri delegation realized they were facing something beyond a species, beyond a civilization. They were confronting a fundamental force of cosmic evolution. "We don't want to conquer," Rodriguez said, her final statement a precise surgical instrument of understanding. "We want to transform." The diplomatic chamber became a hunting ground of possibilities, not of territorial conquest, but of fundamental reimagining. Humanity wasn't seeking a place in the galaxy. They were offering to hunt down its most fundamental limitations. The Quantum Observatory hung at the edge of known space, a structure that was simultaneously a research facility, a communication hub, and a living testament to human potential. Dr. Aria Nakamura stood at its center, watching as the final pieces of humanity's cosmic strategy came into focus. This was more than a moment of revelation. This was the unveiling of humanity's true nature. The Vexneri had believed they were observing humanity. In reality, humanity had been studying the entire galactic ecosystem with a depth and complexity that defied comprehension. Quantum entanglement displays began to map something beyond traditional scientific understanding. It wasn't just data. It was a living, breathing representation of cosmic potential. "We are not what they thought we were," Nakamura murmured to her team. Each member of the research group was a node in a complex, adaptive intelligence network that had been preparing for this moment for generations. The displays showed multiple layers of information: technological trajectories, biological adaptation patterns, cultural evolution models, quantum communication networks. But it was more than a collection of data points. It was a comprehensive map of cosmic possibility. Humanity's true purpose wasn't conquest. It wasn't exploration. It was something far more fundamental. They were hunters of cosmic potential. Each layer of the display revealed a different aspect of their sophisticated approach. Technological systems that could adapt faster than any known civilization. Biological mechanisms that could transform in real time. Cultural structures that could solve problems before they even emerged. The Quantum Observatory was more than a research facility. It was a hunting ground. Not a hunt for territory. Not a hunt for resources. A hunt for understanding itself. Dr. Marcus Chen approached, his neural interfaces humming with quantum-level communication. Final analysis complete, he reported. But it wasn't a traditional scientific conclusion. It was the opening of a much larger understanding. What the Vexenary and other galactic civilizations had missed was the fundamental nature of human existence. They weren't a species to be categorized. They were a method of cosmic problem-solving. The displays began to show potential trajectories, not predictions, but living possibilities. Each potential path was simultaneously a challenge and an opportunity. Where other civilizations saw limitations, humans saw hunting grounds of understanding. Nakamura's team had been preparing for this moment for generations, not through military preparation, not through technological development, but through a comprehensive understanding of possibility itself. We are not conquerors, Chen explained to the quantum records. We are hunters of cosmic potential. The displays shifted, revealing layers of preparation that went beyond traditional scientific or cultural understanding. Technological systems that could adapt faster than thought. Biological mechanisms that could transform in real time. Cultural structures that could solve problems before they even emerge. It wasn't about dominating the galaxy. It was about understanding its fundamental nature. The Quantum Observatory became a window into something larger. Not just humanity's capabilities, but the very nature of existence itself. Each display, each quantum entanglement pattern told a story of a species that didn't see the universe as a territory to be conquered, but as a complex problem to be understood. We hunt, Nakamura said quietly, not with weapons, but with understanding. The final display came into focus. It wasn't a representation of human achievement. It was a map of cosmic potential. Every technological trajectory, every biological adaptation, every cultural evolution model interconnected in a way that defied traditional scientific understanding. Humanity's true identity was revealed. They were not just a species. They were a method of cosmic evolution, hunters of the most fundamental kind, hunting down the very nature of existence itself.